If you had only known in this your day the things that pertained to your peace. This is understood properly in the context of what he would have seen coming down the Mount of Olives, which can still be seen if one is there at the altar of the Dominus Flevit, a little chapel built in the form of a tier. He would have looked down and said, "Jerusalem, Jerusalem." And this play on words is probably deliberate, the things that pertained to your peace. For Jerusalem simply means vision of peace. That comes in the hymn for the dedication of a church, Pacis Visio. The root of Jeru is Yarach, to see, and Shalom, we know well, means peace. But it can apply also to the temple of our soul. Is it not true that we are our own worst enemy? Much of my time is spent handling pain, big time pain, often young pain. People do not know how to handle life. In the travelling community, I have found hidden gems of sanctity amongst the women. There will be many surprises in heaven, but they're hidden, try against all odds to hold everything together in the midst of pain. They have this notion that one hangs on to one's man until death, no matter what. Heroic fidelity, no matter what's going on. But I sometimes weep inwardly because people do not know how much pain they cause each other. And thereby, of course, to themselves. And because then they cannot face what they have caused, they escape, and you know how. The classic one is a large intake of Guinness, but then, alas, it does not necessarily stop there, and we know the consequences. And still, the women hang on. Now, my friends, it's not just out there, but also in here. I mean, in the monastic life too. Pain, pain, pain. And what of your situation? On a daily basis, are you happy to be together? Are you aware that quality of life depends entirely on you? Are you aware that you have the choice here on earth between creating heaven and purgatory, not to mention hell, simply by the way you handle the day? It makes all the difference if one really attracts souls or repels them. In the first instance, actually for ourselves. Notice a person who causes pain. Look at his face, the wrinkles on his forehead, the look in his eyes. That person cannot face himself. So what will he do? He will avoid the issue. He will switch on to anything but himself when he's alone. But the Lord goes on here to talk about a specific issue. The temple of God on earth. My house, he quotes, shall be called a house of prayer. As I used to go to school in the morning in Cardiff, on a daily basis, I passed the synagogue, and it said, chiseled over the door, "My house shall be called a house of prayer for all nations." In those same years, I started to wander into Catholic churches, and I noticed immediately that it was not the same as going into a Protestant meeting house. Even though I could not explain it, I knew that there was a density of presence in this building, which actually was always open, as was indeed every Catholic church in Cardiff, whereas ours were closed. Now, I knew somehow, after a while, that I had to kneel before the box. I also knew that I could not speak in the presence of that mysterious presence and aura. It was something not of this earth, which therefore had its rights. In the diary of St. Faustina, we have one brilliant passage where she goes into a church she had not seen before, somewhere in Poland, and is struck by a powerful grace. And she comments in her diary that there was a sanctity about that place which was something that would have an effect on souls if God were honoured in his house of prayer. If God is given his rights, then God exercises those rights. And there are places where heaven and earth actually more easily meet. I want to go into one specific area this morning, very briefly. It's what hit me in student days in Rome, the time I was living in the same house as Father Michael here. We had in the house a cross-section of ecclesiastical humanity from all countries under the sun. But we had also a contingent from a particularly conservative ambiance, notably the oratory. And we used to talk about things. And we befriended each other because we were of the same culture. And I used to listen to what they would say and read what they would give me to read about their foundation. E.g., Newman, all his life was surrounded with noises of hammers and chisels. All his life, academic though he was built on building for God. The best, and the details were given, how great big marble columns would sail down the waterways to come down to England and end up in the heart of the second largest city in England, Birmingham. Only the best. And eventually, he wanted the best also in the air that he had created. He himself learned to play the organ and became the director of music of the choir that he wanted for God, to produce only the best. He could have gone, after his conversion, in many ways. He looked at the Jesuits, the Benedictines, many people who would be very much according to his taste. But he went, rather unexpectedly, to Rome and to a very Italianate place. The heart of Rome, he found a saint who had realized the importance of one thing: the reproduction of heaven on earth by the simple means of using what he's given us. Beauty in song and organ. And hence it is that the greatest brains of the time were harnessed, and still are, where his spirit reigns. One day, with permission, I wandered into the place that he had founded in Rome, and celebrated at the altar, a private altar in the house itself, where he would do what? He would start off with the same words that we've had now, and then, after a while, the altar boy would go away, because he was entering into mode. He was going, yes, into ecstasy and trance. 2 hours later, the altar boy would come back, when he was coming back to land. Time did not exist when he was there. He would see things and know things, and therefore God was God, and therefore all that he did was inspired by other powers. He wasted no energy, because God knew what he wanted and got his rights through an open channel. That's what Newman brought back. And do you know that since that happened, one after another of these centres of beauty on earth have come to be in what was darkest England. Always packed. Because people, say what you like, need healing, need deep harmony, need something which is beyond the daily, and are willing to travel to get it. But it did not stop there. When talking to one of my friends who was in the oratory, he said to me this: our church is a prayed church. In other words, from morning, early morning until night, there was always prayer going on, non-stop. Density of activity on the invisible. Now, I make a jump. Providence brought me eventually to Italy when we were involved in reopening this old monastery, which goes back to 781. We had a gem of a church, one of the most beautiful in Italy, and we still used the high altar facing east with incense every day. And I had many an account, directly or indirectly, of people who would just wander in and were knocked between the eyes by the lingering incense, the power of the very building, and the lingering chant, which actually was going round on CD in the echoing church, even when we weren't there. Beauty and odour has an effect, a profound effect. Now, what am I saying? I'm saying this. If one looks around now, we are trying to strategically orientate and orchestrate e.g. vocations, trying to orientate and orchestrate faith. And what are our fruits? Because we're using human means which have human results. Create a place where God has space, where God reigns, and He will act. I finish with one thing. One hesitates nowadays when faced with a young man who is coming with an obvious vocation to send him through the normal channels of what is on offer. And one weeps inside because there is no alternative in this land. I ask you to put it before the Lord. Is there a means of somehow giving an alternative in this Emerald Isle to what is out there right now, so that somewhere here on this land, God again can reign with the means that have always worked, and can call freely young men to the altar that He wants for Himself, and not to be divided between Himself and man, where man is DJ, theatrically performing to others, but where God is physically addressed. I mean, yes, facing God and not man, which, by the way, was a great victory for you-know-who. We know it from exorcism, because that was not mentioned in the council document, Sacro Sacro Concilium. Man, when he's in charge, cannot manipulate his God, and we can try as hard as we want, but God will not bless what is not honouring Him. Oratory. Remembering the Mass celebrated at St. Philip's Oratory, where he would go into ecstasy for 2 hours, and remembering also the Mass celebrated with Blessed John Henry Newman's chalice in Dublin. Remembering also how these two brought beauty to the world. And can it be that what, upon an hour, O'er little brains here gains a heavy sway, upon an aeon yet by some high power will land and stand in form, that but a day, tomorrow and tomorrow will abide, that but a cloud of thought, of naught all made, will wade within the currents that yet hide neath mighty mitred heads that tempests shade. O Philip, who didst pause before at this strange presence that thee bore, dost thou there smell the incense that a brain can call from bliss upon an isle grown bleak? And is it well that beauty be so banned, where long did stand a song of limits none on this small land?